Hey folks, Sally Riggs here, psychologist, fellow long hauler, and your new Fora travel advisor. But this video is not about that at all, so more information coming up on what that means in another video. Today's video, I want to talk to you all about the recent acute COVID reinfection that I had in August, and it was my first reinfection in 4.5 years, my first reinfection. Prior to that, I had only ever had COVID back in the original March 2020, and so I learned a great deal from this reinfection that I want to share with you all. Before I jump into all of that, obviously, every acute infection causes major damage to our bodies, even if we don't have long COVID. And so the absolute best thing that you can do is avoid catching COVID again. And I do have another video in which I went through in detail how to, as best as possible, and I followed this video, I made it 4.5 years, prevent catching COVID. So if you want more details on that, pause this video and I will link below so that you can go ahead and watch that other one. So I'm going to break this video into 3 sections. The first section is going to be all about medications that you can take during an acute infection. The second section is going to be about the different stages of recovery from an acute infection. And then the third section is going to be about what to do next. To tell you a little bit of my story, I tested positive August 23rd. I had symptoms on the Thursday. I was a little bit fatigued, scratchy throat, a little bit of a stuffy nose, and I was thinking, oh goodness, what is this? Have I given myself PEM? Woke up on Friday morning and it was worse, and when I tested on an RAT, it was a very strong positive line very quickly. Now, just to say a little bit about testing here, because this is really important too. At this point, rapid tests, RATs, whatever you want to call them, a negative test essentially means nothing. We are at a point where I think the rate for a false negative is between 60 and 70%. If you don't happen to test at the right time, you're not getting the right viral load to test positive, and so millions of people, unfortunately, are testing once, saying it's not COVID, and then merrily going around giving COVID to everybody. What you need to do is, if you are using rapid tests, test every other day for 10 to 12 days, basically as long as you are having symptoms. Also, you should be swabbing not just up your nose, but also trying to poke your tonsils in the back of your throat. And obviously you want to do that first before the nose because that's slightly less gross, but always swabbing the back of your throat, especially if you've got a sore throat. For me, it was suspected I did have quite a high viral load. I have not had any of the vaccine boosters in the last few years because my doctor told me that my immune system was not able to cope with that, and to be fair, every time I had them I was very, very sick, and possibly it made my long COVID worse. However, if you have had vaccines, that is why people are taking longer to test positive, because they have less viral load, and also if you're not swabbing your throat, you will have less viral load. So please, alternatively, if you are feeling flash with the cash, invest in one of those PCR-like testing machines, such as Plus Life or Lucira. They are much more accurate, and very commonly reports of people picking up asymptomatic presentations when they weren't even aware that they had been exposed. So if you really want to use testing as one of your preventative measures, investing in those more expensive machines is definitely going to be beneficial. If, like me, you're still sticking with the RATs, then just make sure that you ignore all negatives and keep testing, especially if you have symptoms. Also, because I'm sure people will ask me in the comments, I use the British Flowflex RATs, the ones that we used to get for free, and they're now 10 quid for 5 in Boots. I use them, because they're very cost effective. Buying rapid tests here in America, you can pay $40 for one test. And also because they're pretty reliable in terms of testing, comparing the different models against each other, they come out pretty well, but still with that caveat of a very high negative response rate. Okay, so medications to take for acute COVID, and really I should entitle this section medications that you should get a hold of now. Because especially if we are thinking about travel, you want to have these meds on you wherever you are. You do not want to be scrambling in a foreign country trying to figure out what meds are available to you. And also, I was in the US when I tested positive. I was on vacation, not really a short drive away, but a drive away. So I was able to pack up my stuff, get in my car and drive home, which was pretty hideous, but it was definitely the right choice. And yet getting hold of meds quickly within that 5-day window is not easy. And I was not successful, as you will hear. So please, if you can, get ahead of time options. That is really going to help you. So let's start with Paxlovid. And this is where I have to apologize to anybody who I have ever recommended that should take Paxlovid for an acute infection. I had never taken it before. I know people talk about that metallic taste. Oh my God, it was horrific. As many of you know, I had a prescription for Paxlovid that I had gotten a hold of a couple of years ago for travel, as I just stated. And so I was able to start it right away. And I took my first dose when I got home, so the evening of the 23rd, let's say around 8 o'clock, with some food as prescribed. And slowly over time, over a couple of hours, that metallic taste came on. And trigger warning for folks who have difficulty talking about vomiting. I'm going to talk about that a lot, unfortunately, in this section, so feel free to skip over. But it was such an unpleasant sensation in my body that I started retching at about 10 o'clock, and I lasted about half an hour before the entire contents of my stomach came up. And the thought of taking another dose was absolutely horrific and overwhelming, and I'm sure I would just have thrown up instantly. So I was able to get an appointment for one of these virtual urgent cares to see if they could prescribe me something else. There are a couple of alternative medications available in the US if you're not able to take Paxlovid. Obviously, a lot of people have meds that it's contraindicated with. And I was able to get one of them prescribed. Lagevrio is the brand name. Molnupiravir is the generic name. And I got that prescribed on the Saturday, but I couldn't find a pharmacy that could fill it for love nor money. And given the choice between resting and calling around every pharmacy in the entirety of Manhattan, I then went on to my plan C, which was the FLCCC protocol. And I will put a link below for you guys to link through to that. Just coming back to Paxlovid for a moment, I would preface, people do talk a lot about having strongly flavored peppermint or cinnamon candies or chewing gum to help with that taste. And obviously I had not been able to get a hold of any of those. In fact, I was on one of those online delivery services on my phone looking at what to order when I was starting to feel nauseous. And even just looking at it and thinking about eating those things, I don't think it would really have helped me, much as I love cinnamon and peppermint normally. So if you do think you can stomach it, just make sure that you have a stash of cinnamon and peppermint candies or chewing gum, like a really good stash. Or think about some alternatives. So coming on to the FLCCC protocol, there are a few things on that list that are a little bit controversial, and obviously with all of these medications, you are checking with your physician whether you have any other meds that they interact with or conditions, etc., etc. However, what I love about the FLCCC list is if you can't get one of the things on there that is prescribed, there are lots of alternatives that are supplements, over the counter, etc. So with that whole long list, if you are in a country that, for example, you can't get Paxlovid, the chances are you may be able to get a lot of the things on the FLCCC list. If you are in a country that only has Paxlovid, then think about all of the caveats I have just given you. And then the fourth thing to be mindful of, which hopefully at this point should be pretty easy to get a hold of anywhere, is metformin. And obviously metformin is a drug that is relatively cheap, has been used for a very long time in diabetes and people who have prediabetes, metabolic syndrome. In the US, if you aren't able to have your prescriber prescribe it, there is a link below for an online pharmacy that will dispense a 14-day. I think they give you a prescription. I haven't used the service myself, but I have a lot of folks that I know that have. And you should be able to get the short-term amount, again checking with physicians that you're not contraindicated. I am hearing in Europe that metformin is relatively easy to get a hold of. I am hearing in the UK that some GPs are open to it. You can sometimes get it from private GPs or from some of those online pharmacy places that lots and lots are available for prescriptions now. The thing to say about metformin is it is the only evidence-based treatment that we have for acute COVID right now. We don't really have trials of Paxlovid. We don't really have trials of any of the other antivirals. There's a little bit of evidence for things that are on the FLCCC list, but not really in acute COVID. Metformin is the one thing we do have some trials of that seems to show both reduced viral load and minimized risk of long COVID. So if you're looking to only get one thing, you're in a place where you have very limited resources, metformin would be the one. And again, just to talk a little bit about the side effects, it is going to give you pretty horrific diarrhea, and you can start with lower doses and build up slowly. And I had trialed it before and not been able to tolerate it, but in the context of an acute infection, I was more than happy to have diarrhea every day, knowing that I was working on that nasty spike protein. So lots of different options. I do hear from people very frequently saying we can't get anything in my country, and I don't think that's true anymore. Even if you can't get Paxlovid, you should be able to get something on the FLCCC list, multiple things on that list. Maybe you can get metformin, maybe you can get a different antiviral, different ones than we have in this country. I know Japan has some other ones. I know that there are some clinical trials that people can get onto, etc., etc. And the bottom line is, I know that so many countries are pushing the message that it's just a cold and your immune system will fight it off. And that is a complete lie. It is not just a cold. We have a ton of data and evidence suggesting all of the different kinds of damage that the spike protein does to everybody, not just those who have long COVID. And also, we also know that long COVID has a huge immune system component, and our immune systems are not sitting there ready to fight off an infection. The metaphor that comes to mind is maybe you've got a horrific gangrene or something and you need antibiotics, and you're sitting there saying, oh no, my immune system will fight it off. No, it won't. You'll just lose your leg. And I think, unfortunately, that is a little bit similarly what is happening for us if we just go ahead and try and ride out a COVID infection without meds. COVID is very serious, and even if you don't have long COVID, you should still be taking medications. But I'm pretty sure folks who are watching this video and do have long COVID, please, please, please make a plan, get things prescribed in advance, put a little pouch together with everything you need in case of infection, so that, heaven forbid, it does happen to you, you've got everything you can throw at it. This spike protein is not messing about. Now, the next question that you might be asking, and I certainly had this on my mind from the very moment I tested positive, is, will this reinfection make my long COVID worse? And it's our biggest fear, it's my biggest fear. And although I am not yet fully recovered, and I will tell you more about that in a moment, I am at a point where now I don't believe that this is going to push my baseline down. Very frequently I heard from people who have had reinfections that there is about a 6-week cycle where you feel horrific and then you do go back to baseline again. Now, I am literally on 2 months because I'm filming this on October 23rd. I am not back to baseline. You can probably hear that I'm getting a little bit out of breath as I'm talking to you, and I have a little bit of tightness in my chest. My heart rate is 90, so that is trending down, but for a while my heart rate was over 100 lying down. And in fact, I have an old alert on my Garmin here that vibrates when my heart rate gets to, I think it's 110. And when I was in the acute phase, it was frequently going off in my sleep. So do expect that dysautonomia, elevated heart rate, and other associated symptoms to be triggered again, despite that lovely cocktail of medications. But there are things that we can do, and I will talk about those in the next section. In terms of the stages of recovery, I was testing positive for 11 days, and I rested aggressively for that entire time. I got into bed, I spent as much time sleeping as I could. After about 6 days, I got to the point where I couldn't really sleep much more, and yet I forced myself to stay in bed pretty much 24 hours a day with watching movies or videos or what have you. So I was very fortunate that I tested positive right at the end of a month's vacation, so I didn't have to worry about going back to work for those 11 days. And coincidentally, I tested negative on Labor Day and then had to start work again the following day. So that was very fortunate, although the flip side that I was very annoyed about is I missed my whole last 10 days of my vacation, but it meant that I didn't have to worry about work. If you can take off work for 10 days, I absolutely highly recommend resting aggressively, because serious things are going on in our body and we don't want to exacerbate that. And foolishly, that first week I did 3 days in a row, not thinking, and by that third day I was kind of a different type of tired, not the super heavy MECFS type fatigued, but more kind of like wired type fatigued, which makes sense if the dysautonomia has been kicked off again, and so my body is going into fight or flight more frequently. So the second week I figured that out, and I split my weeks up, and I just saw patients on a Tuesday and a Thursday so that I could sleep on the Wednesday to recover, and that seemed to work a little bit better. And still those first few weeks back were a struggle, and I certainly didn't feel 100%. A month after testing positive, had to go to London for my niece's baptism, and I was able to do that, although when I got there I was quite tired and I did rest quite a lot. I got an IV that had glutathione in it, which was quite helpful, but I definitely didn't push myself. But since I've been back, so that would be kind of 4 or 5 weeks from the beginning, I have been able to work full-time again, but I'm still taking it very easy, not pushing myself, certainly not exercising at all, and resting a great deal in between work and on the weekends. And then in terms of what to do after you recover, and I don't think I'm fully back to baseline yet, but some important medical things to keep in mind, because obviously the spike protein will have re-kicked off those physiological mechanisms that can cause long COVID, and we want to nip things in the bud and make sure that our long COVID doesn't get worse. So first of all, my primary care physician told me to stay on the metformin for at least a month, which I did. Second of all, I restarted the triple therapy, because if there's any new fibrin that has been created by the spike protein that is going to kick off that cascade of endothelial damage and microclots and everything that comes from that, I've worked very hard to get rid of my microclots. I don't want them coming back. So I happen to have, and this is a top tip, by the way, if you have medications that you have finished using but you still have refills available, especially if you have a very low copay or $0 copays, just go ahead and fill them anyways. I had some Eliquis that I had managed to refill and not used, and some Plavix, and so I just went ahead and started. And then when I spoke to my doc, he said that I should stay on it until the end of the month. Now, I think that's why I'm not back to baseline. When I did triple therapy before, it made me very fatigued. And I've just gotten to the point in about the last week, 10 days, where I know it's working because I've got bruising all over my body, I've had a few nosebleeds, and I'm feeling really yucky. So I think probably it's busting up a little bit of clotting, which is great. And I'm looking forward to November 1st when I can stop. If you can't get a hold of triple therapy, then nattokinase or all the other ones that people talk about in that family, just go ahead and restart that. Again, making sure you don't have any contraindications with any other meds, so that any clots can be busted before they even form. And then I mentioned that my heart rate had been seriously elevated, and I've also been getting out of breath again. Just walking 1 block to Starbucks makes it hard for me to breathe. And so I have also restarted the Safe and Sound protocol. And in fact, when I say restarted, I've nearly finished it. I did the whole thing through once already, and then I actually went back and restarted at hour 3, just to get the really potent bit again, and I just finished hour 4 yesterday, so I've got another hour to go, but I'm definitely noticing good improvement, and my heart rate has been trending down. As I mentioned, 88 sitting here talking to you, so that's getting back closer to where we were, and very important to do those things. Now, again, if you don't have access to the SSP, then thinking about other nervous system work, vagus nerve, you can take a look at my book, you can take a look at my course, and there are lots of videos on this channel which will help you learn how to do that. And my final tip to you is, if you have had an acute infection and you get to this stage of your recovery, go ahead and make sure that you can refill all of those medications that you have used, so that you have a fresh batch ready in case you do get COVID again. I am not planning on getting COVID again anytime soon, and we think I got it from a chiropractor's office, so now I'm wearing an even stronger mask every time I go into high-risk situations. But I have still gotten refills on all of my meds, so if it does happen again, I am ready to go. I hope you found this video helpful. If there are any questions I haven't answered, please pop them in the comments, and I hope you have a tolerable week. Take care.